There. All right, Diana Olick, thanks very much. So when we talk about how to fix the housing crisis, is it time for everyone to take a hit? And should the government step in and mandate that all lenders allow homeowners to refinance at the current rate? Fine. But again, it's not about rates. It's about the value of the mortgage. This is about principle. Let's bring in Mark Calabria, Director of Financial Regulation Studies at the Cato Institute, and David Berenbaum, Vice President for Programs at the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. Good to have both of you with us. David, I guess let's go to the heart of this. We just talked about that headline. The news today that Diana was sharing, you got mortgage rates at record low levels. Still, people aren't refinancing because, well, they can't. You got homes that were once worth $1 million with a mortgage on them, now worth $700,000. You got a $300,000 gap there. No one seems to know what to do with it. How do we handle it?
There's no question that Americans feel trapped in their own homes right now. They are unable to refinance. They can't get access to responsible credit. 1/3 of consumers now have credit scores below 620. We have all-time lows with interest rates, and consumers cannot get out of option arm loans that are about to reset, creating millions more foreclosures. What we need to ensure is that consumers have access to credit. Yesterday, legislation was introduced to allow consumers who have Fannie or Freddie loans to refinance immediately to their to an affordable low interest rate, all-time low. Today, Chairman
David,
Frank,
here's my question again. Where the rates don't really seem to be the problem. I mean, you can't refi if your home is not worth where the mortgage was. I mean, how do you deal with the principal problem?
There are two issues. One, many consumers had these teaser rate, option loan, toxic mortgages that had no relationship to the true monthly payment on a conventional loan. So there we have a gap between affordability and the mortgage amount. The other issue is the depreciation, that 25% figure that you cited. Until we allow principal reduction across Fannie and Freddie loans, and all require it, frankly, not in fact have it in a voluntary process, all homeowners, 8 million or more, are trapped in this catch-22. It's been suggested that we need bankruptcy reform, but Congress has defeated that.
Mark, what's your point of view? How do we get out of this crisis, this statistic, 1 in 4 homeowners are underwater?
I guess my reaction would be, in a sense, so what? I mean, I want to take some issue with the underlying assumption, which is that because if we refinance everybody, they'd have more money and have more consumption. Well, consumption today is higher than it was during the bubble. The problem facing the economy today is not a lack of consumption. And you got a fixed rate mortgage. That means your rate is fixed. To me, this is actually an argument for not keeping the 30-year mortgage. I had a 5.1 and it recently reset down to 3.25. I took that risk of the upside. I got the benefit when rates went down. If we actually had more adjustable rate mortgages, then you would see the mortgage rates be more responsive to movements in interest rates. And we know that in recessions, interest rates go down so people would have more money. And we know that when it gets heated up, interest rates go up, so that would actually pull back consumption. It would be countercyclical.
Mark, you make a really interesting argument, and I know I want to follow up on one part of it, because I know a lot of people think, okay, that's nice what Mark said, but principal reduction, if we did that, it would solve a lot of the ills in the economy. But there's one other downside to mass principal reduction, right? And that has to do with housing prices simply not adjusting to the right level.
And I would agree. I think us trying to prop up housing prices prolongs the adjustment. What housing prices are ultimately going to be driven by are fundamentals of supply and demand. And the fact is we simply built too much housing, and you have to let that stock get worn off. And there's no way you can continue to just play with mortgage rates that's going to change the fact of how much housing is out there. And that's the fundamental driver. We need to let prices adjust. Housing is really just like any other market. If prices fall far enough and low enough, buyers will come back in. And we're actually keeping buyers on the sidelines. People are worried that it's going to fall more. They don't feel like it's hit bottom. I think once we know it hits bottom.
Go ahead, David.
I have to respond to the dogma that the Cato is producing here. The fact of the matter is that the private sector was dysfunctional. Greed and malfeasance, to quote Alan Greenspan, predominated the marketplace. And frankly, we saw appraisal inflation. We saw consumers getting inappropriate loans. Frankly, we all have a responsibility to work through this. There was regulatory failure. There was industry failure. There was failure on so many levels that until we as taxpayers acknowledge that this is a collective issue, we are going to be in this quagmire, staying in this recession.
What about the failure of the borrower? People have a responsibility to pay back the money they've borrowed. We'll never get private capital back in this market again if we cannot expect that people live by the promises they make.
All right, we'll leave it on that note. Gentlemen, I promise you, since there's 1 in 4 people underwater, we'll have this conversation again. We'll have you back, and we appreciate it. In the meantime, viewers, let us know what you think about that stat. 1 in 4 Americans underwater. Do we need to do something about it or not?